And so what we're going to do is actually watch a video of Darth microtransaction, and we're going to look at what his thoughts are. I love his approach because he's so honest and authentic and just gives it to us real. And so let's jump in and see what he's got.
Small disclaimer in the beginning. This is a fun class tier list, so this is literally based upon fun. These aren't power rankings. This isn't me trying to tell you I'm the most educated player on the planet. I'm not. This is me just trying to inform you what I've had the most fun with and what you might enjoy if you're either thinking about starting a new class or when Season 1 comes, you just want to have a good time. I'm going to break down what each of these classes offer that might make you have a good time with them. Diablo.
So this disclaimer, I think, is so like, it kind of shows what's really going on in the space. So there is a lot of controversy around this. There's these group of people just so obsessed with the biggest, best builds. And I'm one of those for sure. Like, I definitely want to know the build guys are going to crush and what's going to about the end game. But man, this game was so enjoyable. There was so much fun in the early storyline, but there's just been a ton of controversy around, what it's going to look like when you're at the end game. Is it fun? Is it interesting? Can what needs to change? What has to change now that a lot of people aren't even seeing? So the fact that he's even having to put a disclaimer on that it's fun and it's okay that it's fun and it's not like the best guide, I think is just something to kind of know for like what's going on. You got to play your game. Like, some people enjoy being the biggest, strongest build, and that's what they're going to do. That's what I love doing in Diablo is I find a build and then I stick out. But early on, I always like try to enjoy the art of what was given to me. Like, what's the storyline? What's going on? Did they do a good job? Are the cutscenes great? And can I actually enjoy that? Because there was so much of my desire to be like this really strong player and kind of blow past the early stuff is still there. And I was like, oh yeah, but what's the best? What are all the legendaries I need now? What's the greatest build? What is the greatest class? And so I'm excited to see what he has to say about this.
For class tier list, let's have some fun with it, because today the class tier list is actually going to be the most fun classes that I have played. We're going to rank these by the most enjoyable. So that way, when Season 1 comes, if you're somebody who's like me, who maybe isn't the best player in the world, I'm not trying to be rank 1. I couldn't even if I wanted to. But what I do want to do is have a good time while I'm playing the game. I'm going to give you my opinion on each one of these classes. Now, I have played each one of these classes to right around level 50 or higher. I got the Druid all the way to 100 and gear them out a little bit. I have a 77 Necromancer. The Rogue I'm about to hit 50 on. I've got the leveling experience. And then the Sorcerer I've been playing hardcore on, which is just about to hit the 40 right around there. And then I have the Barbarian that I played during the betas. So my Barbarian will be my weakest opinion out of all of these, as I have not played it since launch, but will be the next one.
So that's probably a good thing to note is, like, at this point, like, the game changes for each of these builds at different level cliffs. There's just certain places where you get to either the next world tier or you finish the storyline, and the thing changes entirely. Like, there is certain builds where you can't even get final pieces for it till you're in that tier 4, which I think if the earliest people are generally making, if they want to be good on experience and not like dying every 5 seconds, is they're kind of hitting that as early as 63, but some classes right at the mark where they recommend closer to 70, so that's just something to note. If he hasn't gone through some of the end game stuff, that also might change the enjoyability of that. So what I would do, and this is something I did do, is I'd go look at some of the play videos and of some of the later ones when you get there. But he does have a good take on it. I've always found, like, whatever his insights are, it's definitely gonna be enjoyable. But I have noticed there's a big difference between getting to level 50 and taking it to 70 plus.
That I'm going to play, so I will be leaning on my opinion from my friends who have been playing the Barbarian, have got to level 100 on the class heavily. So with that being said, we're going to go left to right. We're going to go Druid.
So I did want to know, so he's very active in the community. So yeah, he was saying he talked to where he was weakest. He actually talked to a bunch of people about where the build's at and how the gameplay actually feels. So that helps a lot for what I just said.
Then we're going to go Barbarian, we're going to go Necromancer, Sorcerer, and then Rogue. So let us start with the Druid. Now, Druid for me, originally, I had a very good time on. I believe the Druid thematically is quite enjoyable. I also believe that the Werebear and Werewolf is very fun. The skills, when you cast them, feel pretty good and are also fairly enjoyable visually to look at as well. I think Druid offers something from a unique perspective in terms of the classes. It doesn't feel like any other of the classes. Now, I have mentioned many times prior that the Druid has a very slow start, and for that reason, I don't believe it can be S tier as the killing of the mobs doesn't feel as good as the casting of the abilities, if that makes sense. And so for that reason, I think because of the good thematics and the way it is more in the in-game, the variety of the builds being particularly high, I do believe that the variety of builds is pretty good from what I'm hearing. There's a significant amount of these, and even the builds I have played.
So this is one of the characters I've taken past level 80. I haven't taken anything to 100. I don't quite have that many hours, but I'm working on it. But the druid is rough in the beginning. But if you stay in, which a lot of people recommend, you stay in world tier 1. As far as the difficulty of the beginning of the game, it's really easy to enjoy the storyline. I didn't really feel a lot of pull, but there has been a lot of talk about how weak both the druid and the barbarian are in early game. But man, when you start getting some of those legendary pieces around, I think, really 30, 35, and you start getting your build together, there's just some crazy stuff. It's cool to be a werewolf. The werebear is insane. And the end game builds are just crazy powerful. I just got all the pieces to do the tornado werewolf, and it is a blast. It is one of the fastest. Like, honestly, if I was more serious gamer and I was gonna like level all these alts, the druid would be one of my first, because it has such a powerful like clear at the end that a lot of the resources, the money, anything you need to kind of build up your other classes can be handled very fast. The runs are incredible. I'm doing like nightmare dungeons, where the monsters are 10 to 12 levels higher than me, and I'm doing them in like 3 minutes, 5 minutes, somewhere in that range. But it makes it a lot quicker to rank up your glyphs and stuff. But it has been a blast to play. I actually really am enjoying it.
Played all felt very different in terms of gameplay style. I think it's fair to say the druid is an A tier in terms of enjoyability, and I would say S tier, but we do have to remove some points because the early game is somewhat brutal, and it takes a bit of understanding, know-how. It takes some items and some levels and some paragon. It takes a lot of things to be able to get druid to feeling like it's dominating. But the other side of the druid that I've already mentioned thematically, skills, etc., is very good, which raises it, instead of from like a B or a C, raises it all the way to A, because the rest of the druid feels very solid in my own personal opinion. Now, the barbarian's the one I have the least amount of experience on. From what I understand, the barbarian itself, it struggles from the same problems that the druid does. Okay, yeah. So you're going to have the same early game issues that can feel a little bit brutal. However, I did level with my buddy while he was playing druid, while he was playing barbarian, and he did seem to very much enjoy the early levels, even while I seem to be struggling. He does seem to have a variety of builds. There's Hoda, there's Whirlwind. People seem to be enjoying those different types of builds. So I think that's fair to say that's somewhat even with the druid. Maybe not as much variety, but I'm seeing a difference of skills between barbarian to barbarian. So I think it's fair to say that the barbarian has that going for it. Thematically, I don't enjoy the barbarian as much personally, just because it's a dude with a bunch of axes. But the thing is, I'm noticing a lot of people do.
Absolutely love that. Yeah, dude. Yeah, he gets 4 weapons, which adds a lot to your ability to add like different aspects later in the game. But I haven't played it directly, but I know whenever I group up, if I just random players or do runs, when I'm playing my druid and a barbarian comes in, man, we just thrash. There's like, it's unstoppable. It doesn't matter what's in the way. Like it's pretty crazy. It's one of the stronger ones. Some of the other builds I notice they're okay, but for some reason it just seems like, man, we just whip through everything that's there.
Actually quite enjoy that thematic. There's lots of people that play warrior only in basically every game, but I don't find the thematics of it unique enough. It's just a melee class. I personally would say the barbarian is like a B tier in terms of fun. The reason I say this is Whirlwind looks very boring to play. It seems like you just click the mouse and you drag. The other issue I have with this is that if you're going to be doing Whirlwind, it snapshots where you started the Whirlwind. So if there's a suppressor and you start the Whirlwind on the outside, but then you go into the suppressor, you literally have to stop the Whirlwind and restart it. This feels like something they should fix, because that's really stupid.
Yeah, that'd be really rough. So that's those bubbles that you pop into. And if you're outside, so if you start your Whirlwind outside that bubble and then you come into the bubble, it doesn't do any damage. That's crap, because a lot of the games, especially the melees, it's about the momentum. So it's like, as you're getting into it, and if you can't start the momentum until you're in the bubble, or you have to stop it, like that really opens you up to be CC'd or killed right there.
Personally, I think the Barbarian also has been nerfed a lot, so that feels pretty bad. So I think currently the Barbarian is probably like a B tier in terms of enjoyment. But I am willing to change my opinion on where I feel about the Barbarian, as it is the last class that I need to play basically to about 50.
So one of the things I heard is anybody who started right away with Barbarian, it was so overpowered that it was crazy. And so when they nerfed it, it just felt weak. It just felt bad. They had to respec everything to make it work. And so anybody who started early really had a rough time. But anybody who started afterwards, after the buffs were already there, and did a Barbarian class, enjoyed the hell out of it. They felt it's still one of the strongest classes in the game. And I think that's so. Yeah, I mean, B is okay. I definitely, there's so much I enjoy about the Druid, and I haven't played the Barbarian yet. That I can imagine that the Druids just how much you can do with it, how different I've done like 3 separate like full builds where I've maxed out everything I could, and they've all been incredible. They all feel really great. And I haven't heard the same from Barbarian. It's usually Hoda or Whirlwind. And I know there's even new ones coming from Druid all the time. So.
And to kind of understand what the early game feels like, to have a better opinion. I am balancing this because I actually would say it's more like C tier for me personally, but I'm balancing this off the opinions of my friends who seem to be enjoying the class. And I'm also hearing that the late game feels much, much, much better than the early game. And this is obvious when you watch really high tier smart players like Rob, who are playing the Barbarian, and they're just chewing through minions and they're destroying stuff and they look like a god. It's like, that does look fun to play. So for me, I think it's right around a B tier. Now we start to get into the classes that I think are probably very, very fun. Necromancer for me, I'm going to say is an S tier, and I'm going to put it all the way at the top, and I'm going to explain my reasoning why.
Well, so I can't wait to hear. This is probably one of my least favorites, and it's because of mobility. It is so slow, but I'd love to hear what he has to say.
Yes, the minions can feel kind of bad early, but if you want to be a minion guy, there are people that have already proven that minions are very good and can be viable and used. Kripparrian is one of these smart Necromancer minion players who has proven that.
So I have not seen this, but I felt minions were total trash. Like every time I tried to move, they're all dead, and I'm just respawning them 1,000 times. The golem was the only one I found that interesting. I did a lot. So this one I didn't play since release, but I put a lot of. I was included in the closed beta where they did the end game stuff. So I got to play all the characters in end game, way early. So a lot of changes since then. But I also I played the Necromancer probably the most before release. So at that point I didn't want to play anymore, but there was a point like in the early, the minions were crazy powerful. They were tanky as hell. I rarely had to like replace them. And then in the betas and the server slam, it was just, they had destroyed it. Like the minions were totally horrible. So I don't know what they're doing to spec it, but that's very rare that I've heard anybody say anything positive about the Necro.
That the minions can be.
Well, about the Necro's minions. The Necro's fun and non-minion builds seem to do very, very well.
Used to very strong effect. So if you want to be a minion person, you can focus on the minion. The blood skills that I started from 1 to about 52 before I swapped to the bone spear felt very enjoyable, even though everyone was telling me my damage was low. I did have to agree that the damage didn't feel good, but the actual thematics of it, the way the class played, the blood mist, the blood wave, the way the abilities look, kind of the same thing I was saying about Druid, where the casting of the abilities feels better than the killing of the minions, is very satisfying. But the Necromancer,
I could see that. Yeah, it is fun. It's just visually stunning, just like transforming into a giant werebear and mauling a bunch of crap. A lot of the blood effects and the exploding corpses, and it is stunning. I still wouldn't put it S class. I don't know. I didn't have as rough of a time in the beginning with the Druid, but it's hard to say because it was my alt after I took a rogue to 80 plus. So I did have a lot of resources, and so that might have allowed me to kind of keep on top of just keeping my character as maxed as I could at any given time.
Necromancer is more satisfying when you do actually get those kills. Like drawing the blood from everybody in AoE and the blood mage and then blowing up this big circle around them. I think it's just one of the coolest moves in the game. I also think the corpse explosion mechanic, while it can be a little bit draining to consistently need to worry about the corpses, it does add almost like a mini game mechanic that changes up the variety of gameplay. So instead of like a barbarian where you're just whirlwinding and just killing everything and just moving through it, you do constantly got to kind of position and use the corpses to pull people in and do explosions and think about where you are positioned relative to that. I pull them in with the corpse syndrome. Then when I'm using bone spear, I throw a bone spear, which goes through them, and then I kind of time it. So right about as I throw the bone spear, they're getting pulled together, etc. And that almost feels like a puzzle for me to solve. And I actually, the more I play Necromancer, the more I actually like it, to the point that people have asked me, what's your favorite, Druid or Necromancer at this point? And I've had to say, I don't know anymore. Honestly, I don't. I actually think the Necromancer feels very good. Now, I do think I'm a little uneducated on the minion side. I need to put more time into that, and I think I'm going to have to study some of the good players like Creparian there doing the minion builds, or just try it like I like to do, which I just sit there and try to figure it out myself. And I'm aware that the builds that I come up with are very often not the optimal ones. So I might actually look into a minion build by somebody else this time to understand it better. But I do think that my experience of going the blood to 50 was very fun. Then going from blood to bone and having the bone with the damage basically one-shotting everything, then I feel very powerful. I like the Necromancer for multiple reasons while I was playing the Necromancer, and I very much enjoyed that.
Okay, yeah, I can totally see that. Once you get off the minion thing, but that's the first reason I wanted to play Necro, is I wanted an awesome golem. I wanted a bunch of skeletons, and they were so strong in the closed endgame beta that it was just kind of sad to see that how much weaker they were, and you almost forced to. But the builds that are not minion based are enjoyable, and I love, like, that's exactly like what I kind of see is like, as you switch builds at different ranges, like when they open up, like, so doing blood through to 50 and then switching over to bone, that for any character I've noticed, like, kind of focusing on points where you can make that transition, it makes the game way more fun, that you can go and build and try a different class and get a different feel and not just wait to the end game. There's kind of these natural cliffs. I don't want to give, I don't think there's any spoilers. There's kind of these natural cliffs as you go to world tiers. When you go to world tier 3, you open up a bunch of gear called Sacred, which usually camps out around, I think about 710 in your item power, whatever that is. So you kind of, whatever you had before that was just a normal legendary, you now need to get sacred legendaries. And so in that move, it's a great opportunity because you've got to re-farm for everything you get to, because they're way more powerful. You want to, but that's a perfect time to like switch up your build, to kind of like look up some guides, see other styles, and start moving towards another one, building up, because you're going to start getting more aspects. You're going to get aspects in the sacred, and instead of just rebuilding the same one, because that's one of the mistakes I made in the early beta, is that I was just rebuilding the same build every time that there's one of these cliffs. Because there's another one when you get to world tier 4 where things go, item powers go to 800, and I think 20 is actually the absolute max. 820 is the cap. And so then you're rebuilding again, and those are all with ancestrals. So there is a really good, at 50 is a great opportunity to start moving your build to one of the other build types, or playing with a different core skill, which is generally how most of these builds are designed anyway. They start with the core skill and they kind of wrap everything around it. So, but enjoyability is very, very high. It is just cool. I was so bummed out about the minions that I would have to take it down. I wouldn't put it in S class. I'd probably bring it down to B.
And I very much thought,
and maybe I should actually do a tier ranking at some point like this, because, but I want to play through all the characters at least to, I noticed, at least into the end game 80 plus. I don't necessarily know if I want to take to 100, man. That is a slow grind at the end there. Props to everybody who does it. Honestly, it is tough.
You know what? I like both sides of this coin. I didn't mind being somewhat weak because I like the blood side. I do think they should probably fix the blood a little bit. It could, again, be an education problem. I need to spend more hours on the class and learn a little bit more. But I felt like the Bone Spear was so good, I was stupid if I didn't play Bone Spear. But the good thing about it was playing Bone Spear felt smooth and good. I do think I agree that the Necromancer is very slow, and having no mobility hurts a lot. And for that reason,
yeah, that is super rough. That is one of the hardest things, because you die all the time just because you can't move. And if you're playing in groups, you're always the last one there, and that just kind of blows.
I would say drag it down to the A tier, but I don't want to do that because I feel like even though mobility is not the key for Necromancer, there are other reasons I really enjoy the class. I don't want to spend the majority of the video talking about Necromancer. I just personally very much enjoy the Necromancer. Now we're going to go to Sorcerer. And Sorcerer for me is more of an A tier. I would say S tier, and I would lock it in at S tier because I like the thematics of it. My problem with the Sorcerer is that when I'm playing the Sorcerer, I feel like some abilities are almost like the Bone Spear Blood thing with Necromancer, where some abilities are almost so much better that I just choose to use those instead of the ones that, maybe I wanted to use. And because of that, it has been a little bit depressing because if I want to go like full fire or full lightning or something, it's just, I feel like I'm getting pushed into a certain direction. That's my negative about it, okay? But my
Yeah, I can totally see that. But it is also one of those balanced classes and enjoyable from the go. It's like because it has the range damage, it's instantly a range. It does a lot of damage early on. I mean, it's a little glass cannon depending on how you're specing it, but at the very early game, man, it blows past the content. It's enjoyable to play. Everything is visually stunning. For fun, outright, like just enjoyed it from the minute I picked it up. I put Sorceress, in S class easy. I don't know about Endgame. I have not taken it past. I think I'm in mid 50s or something like that. But for Endgame, I have seen a lot of people. I think that's the most played character right now is the Sorceress, because they're fun. But in Endgame, I heard pretty much all the builds are pretty well balanced. So whether you want to go lightning, fire, ice, then you get that chance, and the builds are just crazy. So they're not as like meta top tier as you'll see with the druid or I mean, it's like the other one, like all the other classes have like a build that dominates. Sorceress tends to have no build that like crazy dominates, but a lot of really good builds.
positive in terms of why I actually enjoy this class is that no matter what abilities I do choose to use, they all seem thematically fundamentally fairly different, which is a variety that I've only really experienced maybe when the druid. Granted, the blood and the bone are very different in Necromancer, but the sorcerer has a large variety of you got ice, which feels very different from fire, which feels very different from lightning, and they're all very much down their own rabbit hole of like mechanics. For like the lightning has all of this electrical herbs you pick up and kind of zaps everybody, and you really you feel like a lightning guy. And then the fire is like you're definitely burning people. You put the firewall, you shoot in the fire going all the way down. And I like that a lot. It's
Yeah,
actually
that is
very
fun.
encouraging for me as a player because in World of Warcraft I played since Burning Crusades back in the day, and I played Ice Mage. I was a level 80 Ice Mage, right? And I did the Palm Pyro thing, etc. for a bit, but I played Ice Mage, and I liked thematically just going all the way down the rabbit hole of I do ice. So I have the Ice Shield, and I have the Ice Nova, and I have the Ice Lance, and I have the ice. You get it almost. I don't want to say role play as your character, but you got to get into your character. Okay, you got to get into I'm an ice mage, or I'm a fire mage, or I'm a lightning guy. And I actually like that a lot. To be honest, I like it a lot. Granted, I'm playing hardcore in the sorcerer, so I'm going pretty slow. I haven't hit the hard mid game, really the late game yet with the sorcerer. But even early so far playing the hardcore, I've enjoyed that variety significantly already, and it's some of the most fun I've had in terms of being because I sorcerer is the one I definitely know the least about. That I'm just picking through, just like let's try this move, let's try this move, let's see what this one does, and all of them have been fun, although not all of them have been noticeably the same level of viability, or at least not with the early game aspects, etc. I have. So for me, the sorcerer I think is definitely A tier because it feels very good, but I do have a couple small nitpick sort of complaints.
So that is a really good take. Like the pure whatever you are, if you're ice, going all in is really a cool feeling. It also gives me the most like if you played a lot of endgame for Diablo 3, the feel of just demolishing endless waves of minions. The sorceress feels very close to what I remember from Diablo 3 a lot. But one thing that I noticed for enjoyability, like 50 early, like if you're doing tier, especially if you're doing tier one, if you're doing 1 to 50, my high recommendation is not to go crazy off of builds. I totally am about like checking things out and seeing what other people are doing, but there is a lot of fun in the early game by just picking what you think because it's not very there's not a lot of penalty for switching. Like the cost to like undo a point is crazy cheap, especially early game. It gets a little bit more expensive later, but you really don't notice it anyway, honestly, anywhere through the game. But 1 through 50, there there is a good place for just kind of read through them, learn what they take your best guess at it. You can always file, like start following guides a little later when you're actually dropping the legendaries you need anyway. But in an early game, when you're first building out that tree, it is a lot more fun, no matter which class you're playing, to just check out the abilities and make your best guess. And if it sucks, go change it. Like you're not stuck in it. Later, when you're min-maxing your gear, you've got the right aspects, that becomes a lot harder. But early on, there's not a lot of penalty for just trying crap out, trying putting points here, putting them over there, taking them out. A lot of times I would just come back, I'd kind of set up a couple changes, I run and kill a few mobs. If it feels total trash, then I just undo it. It's really easy to do. So, but that's a note for like general enjoyment for the game. That helped, because when I did the original beta, like no guides existed. The closed beta, there was no guides, and it was really fun to learn the skills, learn the abilities, and kind of just everything was new and exciting. And so I do recommend that if you really looking for the high enjoyability of the game, enjoy the storyline, take it slow, read the skills and make your best guess of what you really want to play.
Now, as we get into the Rogue I think is an obvious S tier. I think anyone who plays the Rogue can tell you why it's an S tier. The maneuver,
hands down, just absolutely one of the best. I'll let him talk.
ability feels fantastic. It feels the most mobile out of any classes. You have multiple abilities that make you mobile. Thematically, it fits the name of the class almost better than almost anything else. Obviously, the druid turns into a bear, the sorcerer is going to shoot fire, but the rogue, you feel like a rogue in terms of the mechanics of how the abilities actually play out. When I do a dash, that feels like a dash. When I use Shadow Step, the ultimate, to create an ultimate, that feels like an ultimate, okay? It does very much match the rogue exactly when I pick the class to what I thought it would be. So I don't feel disappointed after picking the class, because what I had in my head is pretty damn close to what they actually implemented in the game. You also feel very strong very early. So from more or less the beginning, I felt good with the rogue. I also think it has variability as well that some of the other classes have. You can play the bow, you can play the daggers, you get a good range of actual ways you can play the game. I do think that some of the ultimates are less good feeling than some of the others. Like Rain of Arrow feels terrible in my opinion. It's really hard to get that to feel like it does very much. Maybe I'm using it improperly, sure, I would admit to that. But for me, some of the ultimates feel less impactful than some of the others, but the rest of the moves feel pretty good. I really like the imbuement system of what you have is you have a weapon, you put the poison on it, feels very much like World of Warcraft, then you use those poisons in order to actually apply an effect, adds another layer, sort of like the corpse explosion actually does. And you'll find that the two classes that have sort of these mini games evolving around them are the ones that I find to be the most fun, because the reality is when you're doing these ARPG grindy type of games, you need things to spice it up, or things that add somewhat variability to it, or like spike moments where you feel like, okay, now I'm strong, go. Like I need those in order for my brain to constantly feel like it's actively participating in what's happening, instead of me just holding down a button like the barbarian and just whirlwinding.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I never thought about it that way, but like where you're trying to set it up your traps, you're trying to get in the right position, you're dashing around to do the most damage. Like there is a lot going on there, and I could see doing it's very similar with the necromancer you mentioned earlier, but I never really thought about it in that way. But it's a very active class. One thing, if you want the old hack and slash and just like kill crap fast and just collect the loot and find out there's a lot more to the necro into the rogue in that. And so no, that makes a lot of sense versus like in the druid, a lot of times I kind of got in a pattern and just mow through everything almost the same exact way. Versus the rogue, I really had to think about when to use my traps, when to jump around, when to use backstab, or like not backstab, the whatever. There's that ability where you automatically port behind the person, and it is really fun. But man, you cannot look away for a second, especially as you start pushing nightmare dungeons. It can get really rough, but you are crazy powerful very early. You do get squishy a little later towards end game, and you got to really figure out how to balance that out with the Paragon board and respecking and the gear that you get. But that's Rogue. I'd easily put. I think he's absolutely right to put Rogue S class. The only real change Actually, I'd probably move up Sorceress for fun, and I'd probably move Necro down 2, and I'd probably move Barbarian down 1. Barbarian was the only one when I was doing the early class where it was really rough in the early game. And maybe I'll have a completely different feel at this point if I go and run him to end game and figure it out. Maybe he'll come up, but I think he should be a C. I put Necro as a B and probably move Sorceress up to S. But yeah, great ideas. But that's another thing to note. Like that's what I think is why there's so few of these like fun. It's easy to definitively say something can crush like high level nightmare dungeons or whip through the content faster than anybody else. It's harder to say what's enjoyable because everybody is so different and unique. And that idea of doing like a classic hack and slash where you're just collecting loot as fast as you can and getting back to get like slightly better, like that's still enjoyable. And I love that part of the game. And then there's the people who are deep into the big builds, the heavy builds. They want the crazy mechanics of it. They're theory crafting, and then there's casuals that just really want to enjoy the storyline and play it. And so there is a lot to be said. And actually, I might follow up with a video of my own where I do the class, kind of the tiers based on after I get a full end game experience with all of the classes. But do a tier where I'm actually looking at fun from different angles, because your enjoyability is going to be very different than other people's, and it's important to know that. So awesome. Let's finish this up.
Again, I do think my Barbarian opinion would change as I play the Barbarian. It will be my next class I play, so I think that's my most unfair rating at the moment. I'll admit to that. But for me, the Necromancer and Rogue have been the most fun classes in terms of from the beginning all the way to where I've got them. They have felt fun all the way through, and I've enjoyed it very, very, very much. I do want to say that the gap between S and B and S and A, and these gaps aren't as big as they might look on a tier list. I think all of these classes are 100% viable in terms of enjoyability, and they're also 100% viable in terms of performance, both late game as well as early game. You can still play the game. You can still beat the things. I see the occasional comment that says, well, I was playing this class and I got to a point where I literally couldn't play the game anymore and got stuck. It's just a skill issue. No class has that at all. All of the classes can progress through the game. Some of them might be more frustrating and feel more difficult and take longer. I myself have explained this with the Druid. I was playing next to Veldshot, who is a rogue. I got to sneeze. Oh, that sneeze came out of nowhere. But I myself have explained the same concept of I was playing the Druid and the Rogue next to me, which is blowing through everything. And it made me feel like he's probably having more fun than I am, which is absolutely true. But in terms of all of the classes, they are all viable. They will all get you through early games, some of them faster than others.
I fully agree with that. Like, you see these tier lists and you think like it's going to be a way worse experience for B, and it's only in comparison to these that you really notice that difference. If you're just like thrown into the game and one of these classes was assigned to you, I think you'd enjoy the hell out of the game. It's only in the comparison and the contrast that you get any kind of breakup ranking versus like absolutely what he's saying. In some games, man, you pick a class and you're in for an absolute dumpster fire. It's just going to be a shitty experience and you got to like get out of it as soon as you freaking can. While other ones, like you just go through it and enjoy every minute. And in this, I have every class that I've touched, I've learned to enjoy if I put enough time into it.
There's admittedly, but when it comes to late game, they're all viable as well in terms of how strong they are. Some are stronger than others, but they're viable for the current content in the game. I believe all of these have cleared Uber Lilith at this point. All of these here can farm Nightmare Dungeons, etc. Some are just better than others. So with that being said, if you're thinking about starting any classes, this is what I personally have experienced just in my first month launch here and what I believe has been the most fun for me personally.
So that was his take on what is the most fun characters in Diablo 4. I think absolutely an amazing look at it because I think at the end of the day, if you're not having fun, you're not going to want to play the game. And there's been so much of like trying to like tell you that, hey, this game's not fun because something that happens way later at the end game. But it is one of the most amazing storylines. It is absolutely incredible. Each time I start a new character, it feels completely fresh. So I love any of these looks that kind of help you get the most out of the game and kind of know to switch it up. Maybe there's like one of the classes you heard and you're like, that's actually a better game style for me. Let me go ahead and jump into that. And on that note, I want to make sure you guys actually catch this video where I'm going to break down the 5 top YouTubers I'm listening to right now to go from good to godly. And DM is definitely one of those. So I hope you guys look at that. If you're looking for more people to listen to, find people that are a community that's excited about this game, these are the guys. So let's get at it.